Rock Lake or any body of water trying to walk, and then they're just like in your face. So that many gnats, bad enough. But apparently it wasn't just gnats. Could have also been translated, this word that we've got as gnats, could have been mosquitoes, could have been lice. Either one somehow more annoying than just gnats. But the way that this one came about, Moses went out and he was told to strike up the earth, and then the dust turned into these bugs. And this was the Egyptian god Geb, the god of the earth. And Pharaoh's magicians, whether or not they actually attempted this one or not, they were unable to replicate it. This was beyond illusion capabilities, turning earth into living creatures. I only know of one who can do that. And apparently, this was so far beyond their illusion capabilities that they actually confessed to Pharaoh that this was the finger of God, but Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. Now, I saw in one of the commentaries there that they weren't admitting to the existence of the singular creator God here. Their word could also have translated into finger of the gods. Whether or not they're saying, hey, like, this is someone in charge. We need to get rid of him. So then, Pharaoh's heart remains hardened, and the plagues from here on out only affect Egypt. And we also switch from more environmentally based plagues to more personal. Things are going to start getting a little more heavy here. The fourth plague, flies, which is apparently attacking the Egyptian god of creation, Khepri, who had a scarab head. And now this word for flies, I mean, again, like with the gnats, flies are annoying enough on their own, but these could have been gadflies or scarabs or a mix of all of them. It's not, just regular old house flies here. But it could have been a mix, a swarm of all different types of biting or stinging, flying insects. And last year when we were at the children's home, I was out in the yard there just throwing a baseball with some of the boys that lived in the home there. And I had a horsefly, just a singular one that was, I guess, attracted to the sweat on my back, and he just kept landing. No matter how much I swatted, that thing stayed there and was biting me, and I couldn't tell what was happening, couldn't see it. One of the boys said, "You got a fly on you." It's like, well, hit it, man. Don't just stand there looking at it. Come on, help me out. But that, man, just one of them was more irritation than I care for. That might sound soft. That's okay. They had a swarm. I mean, look at that. That many biting up all the Egyptians, and I think this one affected their beasts too, the field. But this was the first one that did not affect Israel. God separated the land of Goshen from the Egyptians to show who God's people were. And Pharaoh agrees to let them sacrifice to their Lord, but he says you've got to stay within the city. Now, their sacrifices that we know of were, it'd be like slaughtering a cow in India today. It's one of their gods, and he says, no, your people would see this as an abomination. They would stone us if we started sacrificing our livestock in front of them. So we can't go. We have to go into the wilderness, 3 days journey. And Pharaoh says, okay, fine, dude, just get rid of the flies, but don't go 3 days away. You can go into the wilderness, but just don't go so far. And of course, God does not grant his counteroffer here. And since sacrificing the livestock in the city would have been an abomination to them, the next plague is the livestock. It's more than just a minor irritation at this point. Livelihood is beginning to become affected here. This was after the Egyptian god Hathor, goddess of love and protection, apparently also the mother of Ra, who's their sun god. Now, what she has to do with livestock other than the antlers or the horns, I've got no idea. But it says all the livestock. Now, if we think about that, could all of the livestock have been killed when we see later on that the boils affect all the livestock as well, or some of it? And then the very final plague, which we're not getting to this week, death of the firstborn, that also affected all the beasts of the field. So it couldn't have been every single livestock, but this word all could have been all the different types, because it wasn't just cows. So you've got oxen dying, you've got horses, they had horses, you got horses dying, you've got all the different types. All the types of livestock were dying. Could also say perhaps maybe some of the younger ones, like the firstborn of the livestock, the ones that weren't beasts of the field yet, they weren't put out, they were away in the stable somewhere. Maybe they survived. Yep, but Pharaoh's heart remained hardened because he is a stubborn man, apparently. So the next one, boils. Now, this was after there's a couple different ones there. Either the goddess of war and disease, which wouldn't really seem like an offense against her, more like she's the one succeeding. Or with the slides that Corey sent out, he attributed this one to Isis, the goddess of peace and health. Probably more likely that one. Peace and health, gone. This one was so bad that the magicians couldn't even stand before Pharaoh because it was so painful. And this one was brought about, they took ashes out of the kiln, spread them into the air, and that dust, that ash turned into these boils that popped and turned into sores all over the body, man and animal. And according to some historians, spreading ash out of the fire like this was a way for the sorcerers to show that they were, cursing the people in a way. So this was also culturally appropriate to take these ashes out. And maybe it's also worth noting that their fuel for the fire, it wasn't, trees. This was cow dung. So you've got ashes, burned up cow dung being spread into the air. So disgusting, on top of painful. Again, I would have listened about 5 plagues ago, but Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. You got something?
I wanted to comment on plague number 5.
Okay.
The livestock
Mm-hmm.
being killed. I was confused about that too, and I did some research in it. And the key phrase is in the field.
Ah.
And I also found an article that scientists have discovered ancient stables from early Egyptian that housed almost 500 horses, because they were war horses. So if
Wow.
they had to go have their livestock either in stables or barns or any kind of shelter, they would not have been affected. So the key is in the field.
In the field. What verse are you looking at there?
That's Exodus 9,
Verse 3. Behold, the hand of the Lord will fall with a very severe plague upon your livestock that are in the field, the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the herds, and the flocks. So there would have been some left over, and we see that it has to be there that some were left over, not only for the boils to affect it, not only for the death of the firstborn, but for the next plague, the hail, because any beasts that were in the field and any servants at this point were also killed when the hail fell. Now, mm-hmm. Oh yeah, they were given much advance warning for this one. And why, after all this that you've gone through, I mean, I'm going to keep repeating it over again, why have you not listened yet? You're really going to test the God after seeing all these swarms of bugs and flies? What you got?
Before we move too much further past the boils,
Yep.
they've actually found the mummy that they believe
So it's more than just skin level, right? Surface level on the skin. These boils cut deep. I mean, I guess they had to dig him up out of the Red Sea then, right? Because he got washed away. So if they found that guy, I've always wondered about that. You know, they said they found some chariot pieces there, buried deep down underneath. I don't know if that's clickbait or not, but I love biblical-based archaeologists because, man, it never surprises me. They're always like, you know, speaking of clickbait, it always goes out there in the news. It's like, you won't believe this. It's like, no, I'd believe it. I've already read about it, you know. But that's cool that they believe they've discovered this Pharaoh because of the disfigurement on his mummy. Man, I'm glad that they went through such efforts to preserve history, because it's cool. Also cool to think about that the pyramids were also already very old by this time, because I think, you know, the story of Moses and all this, the Israelites in Egypt, you know, that's an ancient story, but pyramids had already been around for a long time since then. Whether or not they were pre-flood buildings, I don't know. They say that there's some signs of water damage towards the top of some of the pyramids, but that's rambling. Randy's going to tell me afterward, quit rambling if I keep going down that path. I'll get carried away. So much advance warning for the hailstones. And thank you for that. If you've got any additions, do get my attention before we move on to the next one. But much advance warning, and people still wanted to test the Lord. So obviously still some livestock left. And it was more than just hailstones. I keep saying storms. More than just hailstones. There was fire and thunder, and it was breaking down every tree and every plant that was already blooming. So this not only killed more of the livestock that they maybe thought survived from, you know, one of the earlier plagues, but it took down some of their the plants that they needed to harvest as well. But you see, it says that some of them were late bloomers, and those weren't up yet. So those weren't affected yet. And whether or not it's related at all, just to think about the size of these hailstones coming down, I mean, any size. You look at the weather charts, and it says up to baseball and softball size, that's what's considered severe. I mean, any amount of hail is enough to really total out your vehicle, at least. What you got? You going to talk about Revelation? No? Okay. I'll do it then. What did you got? Mm-hmm.
Perhaps his counselors were not told or not provided him with good guidance. It's the same way today. It's the same idea, right? Suffering you can allow things perhaps to happen, but he wants everyone to come to repentance.
Right.
And that's what he's hoping will happen.
2 Peter 3:9. That's a spoiler alert for the sermon later today. Talk about that just a little bit. Just kind of glance over that one a little bit. But you're right, it does seem like these plagues are getting more and more intense. Obviously, the last one was the most intense of all. But they're getting from just, I say minor annoyances. It's more than I would ever want to live through, starting with the Nile turning to blood, but they're getting more and more severe. And it's the Pharaoh that's doing this all. Maybe the history of being in charge, being this supreme commander, has warped his mentality of, who he answers to. He thinks he's a god himself. So maybe he thinks that he can just, and I did plan on touching on this a little bit, maybe he thinks he can just keep getting away with telling Moses to, my bad, I sinned, have your God remove these from it. And, the next day, back to normal, except for the scars left from the boils, apparently. Maybe he thinks he can just keep up that cycle and keep the Israelites there indefinitely. But you see, he's slowly starting to give them more and more rain. All right, you can go stay in the city. Okay, you can leave the city, but don't go too far. Okay, you can go out into the wilderness, we'll see, but don't take your little ones with you. Okay, well, take everybody with you, but leave your livestock. We'll get towards that a little bit at the end as well. But yeah, there's progression. And he just don't learn. But the hail, the sky goddess, Nut, however you pronounce it. I don't read hieroglyphs. I don't know how to pronounce it. Much advance warning, still some livestock to kill. And we see if there's any correlation between the plagues that are promised on the next Exodus when we leave this world. In Revelation, the hailstone promised then weighed about a talent each stone, which is anywhere from 50 to 75 pounds. So not only was there enough hail here, it could have been massive. Taking down trees, killing livestock and men. It doesn't take much to kill a man with hail, but 75 pounds of ice, each one enough to just cover the land. Frightening, mixed with the thunder. And then Pharaoh offers to release the Israelites until the hail stopped. He says, I've sinned, forgive me. And then it says he sinned again. But Moses knew that Pharaoh and his servants still did not fear the Lord. So next came out the locusts. Now, apparently there was a god named Sennacherib that had a locust head, but I couldn't find any information on this one. This was one of the more minor gods. So in Corey's email and in my own research, we've settled on Set, the god of storms and disorder. And this seems more like he's succeeding with this one, right? But this was probably one of the gods that you didn't want to have the wrath, affected on you. So storms and disorder. The locusts came up, and Pharaoh's servants are starting to get fed up with him. Told him, hey, let these people go. How long are they going to be this thorn in our side? Because Egypt is ruined, right? They said that before the locusts came. Egypt's ruined. Well, God's going to show you just how ruined it is. Because the locusts come and eat up all the rest of the plants that weren't killed in the hail. And Pharaoh calls up Moses quickly and asks, who all is to leave? Moses tells him everyone's going to leave. But Pharaoh only permits the men. No, you've got to leave your kids here. Not good enough, right? So the locusts come, they called upon Egypt, covered everything, everywhere, and Pharaoh repents again. Asks for the locusts to be removed quickly, but again, like we've seen the pattern already, hardens his heart once again when the locusts are gone. Which then brings upon the darkness, God of the darkness there. In Egyptian mythology, the sun god Ra, he's responsible for putting the sun up in the sky every day. And if we remember the god that had the scarab head, apparently he helps him move the sun through the sky, kind of like a dung beetle would push the dung along. They think he's pushing the sun. This guy helps Ra. And then every night, Ra goes into the underworld and has to battle a god named, we not get there yet, Apep, the god of darkness. And every day that the sun rises, Ra wins. Here in the middle of the day, goes dark. This is a darkness to be felt. And that's what this slide is. Here's what that would have looked like. Darkness. They couldn't even see one another, but the Israelites, they had light. So Pharaoh calls for Moses. And here we've got Ra on the left and this embodiment of darkness, this snake that he has to fight. I mean, you got to give him points of creativity, right? So Pharaoh calls for Moses and said all the people could go to serve the Lord, but they have to leave the livestock behind, trying to keep them anchored into the land of Egypt so that they would have to come back, right? That's what the whole no hoof shall be left behind were from Moses. And this is probably when it dawns, no pun intended, it dawns on Pharaoh that they do not intend to return to Egypt. And he threatens Moses, get out of my face, for if you ever see me again, that's when you'll die. And Moses takes him up on his offer. I will not see you again, he says. I will not see your face again. Oh, the foreshadowing. We're just about on to our first bell. So we'll talk about next week a little bit. The last plague, this is a photo of Hirohito and General MacArthur there, because they also thought he was both God and man. And this was a strategic photo that was released to show just how small of a frail little man Hirohito was to his people, because they also revered him as part God. Not next to Big Strong American though, right? So the same God that we serve today is more powerful than all the ancient gods and all other religious leaders, which may be obvious to us that he is all powerful and in charge, but these other cultures that believe in these other gods, they don't just believe in them for no reason. When you start actually studying other religions, like I know you're studying with Brian on Wednesdays, you'll start to see kind of how they formulated the thoughts. You know, it's not just something that somebody cooked up one day. And we've got to be careful, because it can be our influence that lends into this. We've got to live accordingly. And we can see that with something called the Mesha Stela, or the Moabite stone, which is one of the oldest things uncovered that mentions Israel outside of the Bible. And here on this stela, it's, 2 Kings chapter 3, when the king of Moab, king of the Moabites, rebelled against Israel. And Chemosh, their god, the god of the Moabites, mentioned several times. I mean, mentioning him doesn't mean he's real, but the Moabites believed he's real enough that King Mesha sacrificed his own son during the siege when he thought all hope was lost, and it turned the tides against Israel. Why it turned the tides against Israel is up for debate. You know, God could have been angry at them for the siege, whatever maybe they went about it improperly, and caused him to commit such an atrocity as sacrificing his son on the wall there of the gates of the city. But for whatever reason, the tides turned against Israel when they thought it was a sure victory. I mean, he was down to less than 700 men at this point, and even those weren't enough to break through till he sacrifices his son. But in this stone, the Mesha Stela, he attributes his success and his victory to his god, Chemosh. So not only do we push people away from God when we don't act appropriately, we give them reasons to follow other gods. So that's all I've got for this morning. Next week, the final plague. Does anybody have anything to add or any other questions before we wrap it up? Anything you wanted to say about the plagues that you did in your own studies or anything like that? Okay, thank you. This was my final fill-in date for Corey's class, so it's Corey from here on out.